Okay, welcome to another WLRN live stream. Today we will be discussing Feminists Working with the Right, which has been a conversation that many women have been engaging in recently, most recently at WDI-USA's convention in San Francisco. There was a panel discussion, and I have two of those panelists here with me today, Menasche and Fran. I also have Hart and Jeannette Cooper. We're going to get started with Fran. Let me just pull her onto the screen here.
Hi. Good to see you, Thistle, and everybody.
Great to have you. Fran is coming at us from New York City. She's a lifelong feminist and was greatly influenced by Red Stockings of the women's liberation movement. She was a leader in the housing protest movement in NYC in the 80s and 90s. In 2000, she founded the Street Harassment Project to fight against harassment of women and girls by men in public spaces. You're a woman after my own heart, Fran. In 2002, she founded WBAI's feminist radio program, Joy of Resistance, multicultural feminist radio at WBAI, the only terrestrial or non-podcast radio program in the Northeast U.S. dedicated solely to women's rights. So welcome, Fran.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Thistle. This is this is amazing that we were all able to make it. Some of us have been a little sick. Okay, so you've given me a good introduction as to my recent activities. I will say also that I first became a feminist in around 8 when I was told there was something I couldn't do because I was a woman, because I was a girl, and that got me very angry. But I felt pretty much alone with those kind of thoughts until high school when I read Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, which was pivotal in the lives of a lot of women, and even a reread. It's still really, really good stuff. And later on, I became a little more political. I was an art student. I wasn't from a political milieu in my family, but I got out in the street fighting for my neighborhood. I was always a feminist, as I said, and the housing movement I was in was so male dominated that I decided to devote my full activist energies to the feminist movement at that point. That is what needed doing more than anything else I could think of, and that I wanted to do. So you have it pretty well down. We did a consciousness raising in 1998. A number of women, including Brooke Williams, who's a fantastic radical feminist writer, and many women that I just knew. And we asked the question of, has anything happened to you in the last 6 months that you think is unfair and that wouldn't have happened to you if you were a man? And we got incredible range of answers. The one that stood out was that the younger women, particularly, were being harassed in the street constantly by men. And we wanted to restart the feminist movement, which had gone into another eclipse at that point. This is in the early 90s. This was in the late 90s, rather. And we started the Street Harassment Project, which lasted for 6 years and became a basis for some other street harassment work by Holly Kierl of Stop Street Harassment, etc. And then I had the opportunity to get into radio. That's a longer story, but I founded the first, well, not the first certainly, but the current at that point feminist program at WBAI, which is a left-leaning radio station, non-commercial in New York City, which had always been part of my life. So I've been doing that for 21 years. It's a weekly show. You know, Thistle, from producing shows, this is hard work. But there's no end to the topics. I have been following the right wing and the particularly the nonstop assaults on the right to abortion, which was so hard won in 1973. That was radical feminist energy went into that fight. The story isn't well enough known. One of the things I do on the show is tell these stories that should be known and aren't well enough known. A lot of history, because we need to know our history to understand where we are. And red stockings helped to teach me that. It's really critical for any movement. So getting to the right wing. I first attended a conference about 25 years ago at Columbia University where there was a lot of information on the plans of the right wing to dominate the whole society. I mean, concrete plans. So let me go to some of my notes. So I want to deal a little bit with what is the right, since we're going to be discussing that. Well, they're a huge web of interconnected organizations that have been working together for decades on a long-term political strategy, and they're very, very well funded. The Council for National Policy, which is a kind of central organization of this group, was founded in 1981 by Tim LaHaye, whose roots go back to the John Birch Society. For anyone ever, that was the far right in the 50s and the 60s and even before. It's a secretive, the CNP, or Council for National Policy, kind of draws all these groups together. Organizations such as the Heritage Foundation, which works against lesbian and gay rights and much more. The Alliance Defending Freedom, which is right now trying to take away the abortion pill from the millions of women that still could have some access to abortion since the overthrow of Roe. The Family Research Council, the Concerned Women for America, which of course is totally anti-ERA, the Federalist Society, which has basically stocked the courts with far-right judges, resulting in the overturn of Roe last year, because they were ready, willing, and able when they got the right president, and he got them on, fairly or unfairly. So their stated aim is to dominate every institution in the country, state legislatures, theological schools, churches, the fields of medicine and the law, school boards, the media, public opinion, etc. And they have worked nonstop at this for a good 40, 50 years. And as I said just now, a lot of their efforts have borne fruit. Roe versus Wade, which was a kind of crown of the legislative achievements of the feminist movement, it did not just fall of its own weight. It was dismantled step by step by step over years and years and years. And finally, those three judges, and boom, that was their goal, and they achieved it. They also achieved the overturn of affirmative action, and there are now going to be less people of color in different institutions and less women also, which of course include people of color. So the best way to see the right, in my opinion, from all of this research and current events following them, is not as a collection of different issues, some of which we might agree with, some of which we might not agree with, but it really is one interconnected organism, an umbrella or a master plan, and every part of it supports all the other parts of it. You can't peel away individual issues and say, well, this doesn't relate to it, because all parts of it strengthen the other parts of it. That's how it works. And they're all funded, by the way, by the same organizations. So feminism was one of their targets when in the 80s. It was very popular. The Republicans, who were the voice of the right and have become more and more the voice of the far right, they had to find a way to co-opt feminism, because they never liked feminism. They, as you know, the conservative point of view about women is that women should be subservient, and they have fought just about every piece of legislation that could help women, including women's sports, by the way. It's interesting that now they're fighting for men to stay out of women's sports, and they've taken on as their issue, but the right wing didn't think anything that women deserved women's sports facilities and always voted them down until recently, when they could kind of exploit it. So the Independent Women's Forum was born in, I think it was the 90s. It was co-founded by Lynn Cheney and the wives of powerful Republican men. It claimed to be in the service of women, but it voted against any legislation that could actually help women. And I'm talking about affordable childcare, paid parental leave, equal pay, stopping violence against women. They voted down WAVA or try to every time. And it instituted a campaign against feminism. The Independent Women's Forum says it's nonpartisan, as many conservative organizations do, but they have put out many slanders about feminism. They are listed even in all the descriptions on the web as an anti-feminist organization. They said that women who complained about their status as women were, quote, victim feminists. Unfortunately, that got into the popular vernacular. They claimed that the answer for women was entrepreneurship or starting small businesses. And that was carried on into the Trump administration, with Ivanka Trump being the role model of the businesswoman. Right now, nothing wrong with entrepreneurship. However, that the women need policies and that will help us. And of course, that isn't a policy, and most small businesses fail anyway. So the right has been trying to co-opt feminism for a long time, and its current adoption of the transgender issue, I see as an example of that. It features borrowed feminist rhetoric and has guests on their talk shows, and it engages our speakers, and they are saying that they attack particular evils of the transgender movement, such as men and women's sports, and shared locker rooms, and all kinds of stuff. Children being transitioned without adequate understanding of what they're getting into. Okay, they've got some issues that a lot of us have questioned. And are even actively fighting to change. However, even though they do that, when you look at their websites, you see that they're not just against certain aspects of transgenderism. What they're against is, quote, LGBT, right? So sort of right behind that, the transgender issue, it's a kind of smokescreen, and behind that are really attacks on lesbianism, gayness in general, and feminism, which of course questions gender roles. So the right has always been against all those things, and as I said, I think it's a kind of smokescreen. So I think I'll stop there, and I have a little more to say on that as we go on. But that was my introduction to what the right is, and it implies, and I'll talk about this later, why I don't think we should be working with them. I think we should be in autonomous left-leaning organizations. I think that's where feminism belongs, and that's what I've been working toward.
Okay, thank you so much for that comprehensive introduction, Fran, not only to your own work, but also to the right, as you understand the right. I'm really excited now to introduce Jeannette Cooper. She is a mother, a scholar, and a founding member of Partners for Ethical Care, which is a nonprofit organization focused on raising awareness and supporting efforts to abolish the affirmation model of, quote unquote, gender identity. She has testified in legislative hearings across the country supporting bills to protect children from gender identity affirmation. Now, these bills, I think, are largely bills coming from Republican politicians. So as you will hear, dear listeners and dear viewers, there's going to be a difference of opinion here between what Jeannette is going to say and what Fran just told us. She resides in Chicago and has been vaccinated against the right-wing cooties. So welcome, Jeannette.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you so much, Thistle, for organizing this. I wasn't at WDI, but I'm glad to be here, and I very much appreciate your time and opportunity to speak on this issue. Like I said, I think most of what I do right now is working with Partners for Ethical Care. We're all women organization, an all female organization that works to protect children against the affirmation model, the concept that there is such a animal as a gender identity. So we don't believe in such a thing. And so we're interested in legislation and litigation that will solidify in our government the concept that there should be no affirmation of gender identity, that biological sex is real. I can't believe I have to say this. And so that's what we work toward, is policies, whether that's in like school boards or in laws or anything like that. That's our unitary focus. We have a bunch of other issues that we disagree on as a group. We have kind of a core group. We're all volunteers, and our core group disagrees on, I would say, major issues, huge issues, but we come together to work just on this issue against the gender identity affirmation model. So we've done that successfully. I think we're coming on year 3, which is pretty great. Our annual budget's pretty small. You would not believe what you can get done with the free labor of women, especially professionals. So we're really proud of what we've done. I have spent countless hours with people who are, I guess, labeled the right, just as I'm labeled transphobic and a bigot and all kinds of other things, which I just kind of chuckle at because I'm not really a label person. I'm most interested in working with human beings and treating them as such. I think when I can treat people with kind of dignity and human dignity, I can get a lot closer to them. And when I do that, I feel like we can learn from each other. We generally don't learn from each other when we're shouting at each other or trying to convince somebody of something else. I think when we develop a relationship of trust, it's more amenable to learning. So my background really is in homeschooling. So my PhD work and dissertation that I'm working on is in homeschooling and government regulation. So briefly, I feel very confident in the success that we will see in the trajectory that we're taking in terms of legislation and litigation, especially against school boards and school districts, around the concept of gender identity. The right is extremely well organized. They have a top-down structure, which works in our favor. Sometimes when we want something to be accomplished, it's basically like clicking your fingers, and they all kind of fall in line in the most horrible and awesome way. So it's quite an opportunity for us to accomplish the specific thing that we wish to accomplish, which is to stop removing the breasts of girls and to stop chopping off the genitalia of boys. The faster that we can get that accomplished, the better. Because we can't reverse time, and we certainly can't put those parts back on. And the faster we stop the trauma that is happening to children and will continue over their lifetimes, the better. So I guess like I said, I spend a hell of a lot of time really talking one-on-one with legislators. I remember talking to this guy named Brian McCann. I think he's like Illinois Family Institute or something, maybe a year or two ago. And I said, I really appreciate your time, Brian. This may be the only issue we agree on. And when we're across the fence from each other the next time, I know that we'll treat each other with respect. And that's what we've done. And there are many times that I disagree on many things, but sitting at the table with Republican legislators gives me an opportunity to talk about other things, because if I'm not at that table, I don't really have that opportunity for them to actually listen and have a sense of trust with me. So I do appreciate their time, and I do very much want to be treated as a human being, and thus I have chosen to work with really anybody on the issue to stop the affirmation model. And yeah, I'll take any questions later. I think, like you said, Thistle, we have disagreements on this issue and in different ways of going about a bunch of different things. I like to say also that I guess I voted in every election since I was 18, and I voted Republican once, and I'm still alive.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's male politics, right?
All of it.
The Republicans and the Democrats are male-led, male-centered. I mean, our whole government is male-centered, really.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how do we change policies to aid women and girls? And I mean,
when I express the difference, like when people ask, how do men work together and how do women work together, and men work quite a, top-down hierarchical model. Partners for Ethical Care is not that. We're very much a feminist organization, and we work collaboratively, meaning I try to embody that in the work that I do with really anybody. Like I said, sure, it's a lot of Republicans, but I can tell you now, we wrote legislation. And I don't really care what the source is. I want to get my hands on that legislation and craft the wording. That's why I'm interested in that. I'm not going to say that, somebody's going to take control of that. I want to work collaboratively with anybody. And I think working collaboratively is very much a feminist endeavor.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And I think that kind of that's in contrast to the feeling that Fran was describing of you being taken advantage of and co-opted.
I don't think anybody could take advantage of me. That's probably not possible.
Right, but we'll discuss that idea, because that is an idea that's out there. And I know that you feel empowered. You're talking to policymakers and actually having a hand in writing the policy.
Most of the time we'll actually hand it to them, and then they'll put some revisions. I mean, they write to us and say, do you have a model bill? And the answer is yes, we've written one. Okay,
well, thank you so much, Jeannette. We are now going to move on to our next guest. I will introduce her. She is Ann Menasche, and she's a civil rights attorney living in San Diego, California. She's a lesbian feminist who's a founding member of Feminists in Struggle, a political group for women in the U.S. to organize and strengthen female solidarity, and is a member of GASBAR, the Green Alliance for Sex-Based Rights, and comes from a long tradition of voting and running in the Green Party, having become disillusioned with America's two-party system. So welcome, Ann.
Oops, you're fading. You're freezing for a second.
Welcome, Ann. Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah, you were fading.
Okay, perfect. All right, go for it. Introduce yourself.
All right. Please. Thank you, Thistle, for having this, and excuse my voice. I'm getting over COVID. The price I paid for going to a very fascinating conference in San Francisco with WDI. I have a long history of fighting the right in real time. I was very involved for decades in the pro-choice movement, the abortion rights movement, and for the Equal Rights Amendment, and also for lesbian and gay rights in the early years in the late 1970s into the 80s, and also more recently for marriage equality. So I have to agree with Fran on her description of the people, of not the individuals, but these organizations and what they're fundamentally about. And I think we have to have historical memory that they are not fundamentally our friends, even when our positions may overlap on some things. So I think, but we are in a very difficult situation right now, because I see the Democrats also as our enemy. Neoliberalism and which I think the pushing of transgender ideology has been part of, is basically represented by the Democratic Party. And it's also corporate and corrupt, just like the Republicans, and also anti-women. They did nothing to protect women's reproductive rights, really, when it came down to it. They had many opportunities to codify Roe. They never did. They mostly use it as an election ploy. And it's really the women's movement that won what we won. It wasn't the Democrats. So I think it's a mistake to rely on either party and not to see clearly that we have enemies. They are our enemies. We have two enemies, not one. And that's always been my position. We have two enemies and not one in this situation. So how do we function as feminists in this not ideal kind of situation where we had a mass feminist movement. We had a mass gay and lesbian liberation movement. Those things have been pretty much destroyed. We're trying to repiece and put together a feminist movement again, but we're at a very small stage, like Who Shrunk the Kids, Who Shrunk the Movement. I mean, I used to be able to, in San Francisco decades ago, I had a lesbian feminist organization called Lesbian Uprising, and we had a mailing list of 1,000, and we had 30 people, 20 people, 30 people come to meetings. Now I'm lucky nationally if I can pull that off. So things we are in way weakened condition. But I think we have to be aware of our history, and we have to be open-eyed about the forces that would push women back. And I think, as I said, they're two, not one. So I think for me, the most important thing is independence, political independence of feminism, that we build our own independent movement. We reject depending on either corporate patriarchal party for our salvation. We fund our own movement, which is extremely important. So we're not beholden to anybody else. And we start putting the pieces together. Now, how we work on specific issues, I think we have to take case by case, but we have to have our eyes open and recognize the landscape as it is, and not forget our history and forget reality. We have to be good on reality. So I'll stop there as just an introduction. I have a lot more to say, but.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne. And finally, I will now introduce our final speaker. Her name is Holly. Oops, excuse me. Let me get this. So our final speaker today is Holly Hart. She's been a second wave feminist and lesbian activist since 1970, when she founded Portland Gay Liberation with two gay men. Holly was the chair of Oregon's Task Force on Sexual Preference, the first official state entity in the nation to study and make recommendations on how homosexual women and men could be better served by government and nonprofit organizations. As an attorney, she represented many gay women and men in child custody disputes with their former heterosexual married partners. In 1980, she opened up Old Wives' Tales Restaurant and Women's Center, providing a place for second wave feminists to gather, and as the first alternative to lesbian bars in Portland. Old Wives' Tales served the women of Portland in this way for 34 years until 2014. After retiring from OWT, Holly became active in radical feminist organizations like Sovereign Women Speak, Wolf, WDI-USA, and she's now Oregon co-chapter leader for Gays Against Groomers. So welcome, Holly. We're so glad that you are here. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, well, you've, mostly introduced me. What I am currently doing, and I'm speaking from my experience in my current activism, is I have been working with the Washington State organization, Sovereign Women Speaks, and with Wolf, and with WDI-USA, and also with a local group of Oregon parents whose children at some point were caught up in the whole transgender, ideology and thought they were trans. And so, unfortunately, some of these kids still do. And in all of these organizations, I work with Republicans, because there are Republicans in all of these organizations, including, by the way, Gays Against Groomers. So for me, it's not what do we define as the right? Two of the women just now, described it, Anne and Fran described at length the organized right, and by right, it's actually right, the right of right. It's not centrists who might be, right of center. And I just want to say, not all Republicans are the same. And yes, there are right-wing organizations like the Heritage Foundation that are very well funded and very powerful, and they have an agenda that is not at all going to be the agenda of those of us who care about women overall. But as Anne has also noted, what's the left doing? The reason that we got Dobbs and are stuck with Dobbs and are fighting for our lives and the lives of women in every single state in the union at some level is because when the Democrats completely controlled the federal government, the first Obama administration, they didn't bother to pass national legislation protecting abortion. Okay? It wasn't their priority. And a lot of us think it's because they knew that a decision like Dobbs was coming. Okay? They knew it. We all knew it. We all knew that as soon as the Supreme Court had enough conservative justices, that Roe v. Wade would be abolished because the conservatives were already chipping away at it at the court. And so step back and look. The Democratic Party, the organized Democratic Party, is not our friend. It's not the friend of women. Many of us believe that the reason why in the Obama administration they did not pass national legislation protecting abortion is precisely to preserve the issue so that women would be forced to continue to vote for Democrats the further along the destruction of Roe v. Wade went. And by God, that's where we're at. And what we are being told is that abortion is the most powerful thing. It's the most important thing. Everything has to revolve around preserving women's right to abortion. And therefore, the leap then becomes, and therefore we have to oppose everything that anybody on the right is for. And that is a leap. That's too big of a jump for me. Anyway, sorry, I really got fixated on that one thing. So I want to urge all of you at some point to go to the website of the Women's Liberation Front, right? womensliberationfront.org, and read under About Us the history of feminist cross-aisle collaboration. Because I don't know, before this time is up, maybe I'll end up reading it. But basically what it's doing is it's going way back to pointing out that much of the most important legislation, including the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, were introduced and supported and only came about because of Republicans. Now, yes, I know that the Republicans 100 years ago were different, but so that can get us into the weeds. But even much more recently, well, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just really urge you to read it because it's far more articulate than I can be in the limited time that I have. And right after that, in the same section of the Wolf website About Us, it talks about working together for all women. And it simply isn't true that all radical feminists in the United States are liberals or conservative. I'm sorry, but I'm usually more articulate, but this isn't going to be an articulate moment. I think that it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater to say that we cannot in any way, shape, or form do anything that like vote with the Republicans on some piece of legislation, let's say to keep boys out of girls' sports and men out of women's sports. That's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. why wouldn't we want to encourage Democrats, in a red state legislature to vote with the Republicans when the Republicans introduce protections like keeping men out of women's prisons? How is that advancing the Republican agenda? That's what I hear a lot. Boy, if you support anything they support, you're advancing the Republican agenda. Really? No, I pretty much think the single out issue of keeping men out of women's prisons, that's if the Republicans are willing to prohibit that, then why wouldn't we support that? Why wouldn't we support Republicans who want to keep males out of female sports? The passage of legislation like that only does that. It doesn't somehow put money in the coffers of the Heritage Foundation or cause people to vote Republican. What's causing people to not want to vote Democrat is because of the positions of Democrats on issues that we care about. And so, I've been told by Democratic operatives here in Portland that it's the old, we'll deal with the woman issue later, but first we have to beat the fascists. We'll deal with the transgender issue later, but first we have to beat the Republicans. No, we need to look at what's best for women on an issue by issue basis. And so I'm going to
Okay, thank you so much for articulating that, Holly. And if you look at the comments there, you've got lots of fans. You did a good job of articulating.
Okay, sorry, I don't feel particularly,
You got it out there. Okay. Let's focus on the issues and what are the policies that are going to keep men out of women's sports, and let's support those policies. That's basically what you said. I'm going to bring Fran on now to respond to that. So here you go, Fran.
Okay. First of all, let me say that there's a very big difference between working with individuals and working with large, well-funded groups that historically have lots of power. That's in answer to something that Jeannette said. And I'm all for organizing with everybody, okay, as individuals. But there really is a big jump in scale when you're dealing with very well organized, historically interconnected groups. When you I don't believe that this right-wing organism gives away anything. I don't believe it does anything for nothing. It is historically our enemy. It is against everything that feminists stand for. And that certainly includes their Christian right faction, which is enormous. And then if you jump ahead and you look at collaborations historically between right and left does have meaning. Left ultimately is not greed over everything, which the right wing is. The right wing, their Bible is Adam Smith and the Christian Bible. And, the left is, some people say, the left is not relevant, but the left is relevant because the left is based on to each according to their need. In other words, people over profit. Now, you might say, well, what is the left doing nowadays? Very, very good point. The left has become decimated, has become dismantled in many ways, and it needs to be rebuilt because if we don't rebuild it, we wind up with this right-wing thing, this juggernaut that is against the environment. They don't even believe that the environmental crisis is human-made. They all said that on the Republican stage of the debate. That is against Social Security and actively working against it, that is absolutely against all of women's rights, actively working right now. And I don't know how you form coalitions with people who are trying to take away the abortion pill, which is the last frontier of what women are counting on now that 21 states have taken away abortion. And no, I don't think abortion is the only issue. And I do think that the Democrats did let us down by that sin of omission, of not reinforcing Roe versus Wade. However, women were only 86% of women I'm sorry, I got that backwards. 86% of women did not have access to abortion before that juggernaut on the Supreme Court took away Roe versus Wade, and that was because of constant Republican chipping away. These people don't rest. They've been working just not stop for 50 years, and they're proceeding with their plans. If they get into office next time around, that's a Trump, which is even a possibility of another presidency, that's it. Everything will be decimated, every progressive thing. Now, the Democrats. I am not a Democrat apologist. I see they do lots of things wrong, and I think that the transgender issue is a tragic mistake on their part, which there are some signs they're beginning to pull back on because they understand that the people are not with them. Nevertheless, the Democratic Party is a kind of repository of earlier progressive achievements, okay, such as Social Security, et cetera. They don't defend them well enough, and that is why we need a real left. We need a left that will create a society that really goes in the direction of people over profit. And in a society where it's profit over people, women are always at the bottom of the barrel. We're the bottom peg of the 99%. So we really need something left. I maintain that we are wasting our energy throwing it to the right. They can very well, as Holly pointed out, they are very well funded. They really can take care of themselves. Using our feminist energy to be what I call the tail wagging the dog is really just throwing it away. And we lose our credibility when we have anything to do, when we have any public appearances and public coalitions with the right, such as what Wolf did with the Heritage Foundation. I cannot tell you how impossible it is to talk to people who are left of center, from the Democratic Party on down to the real left, when they can say to you, but the people who are, so-called attacking transgenderism, they collaborate with the right. It is almost impossible to not get caught in that sticky glue of being associated with the right, which is BS. And there are now organizations, feminist organizations, that are beginning to say, no, we will not work with them. We will not be the tail that wags the dog. We will focus on people who are left of center, who, by the way, are dying to join us, but will not do it as long as we work with the right. And, there's Are You Asking Why is a group of desisters and detransitioners who is saying that. Other feminist groups are saying that. And many people on the left are dying to get into it, but don't want to be tainted with the right-wing thing. And ultimately, historically, the right wing is the enemy of feminism, period. And you really can't just shrug that off. They're working right now to take away all of our gains. So, and also we're weaker. We're weaker than they are. When you work in a coalition, there should be equal partners. But when one partner has so much power and the other doesn't, you just get this tail wagging the dog effect, and you lose your own credibility.
Thank you, Fran. Holly has asked to respond to what you're saying. What do you think about this, Holly, the tail wagging the dog?
I think Holly's muted.
Muted. Hang on. Sorry, Holly, you were muted. Go ahead.
Yeah. What I hear Fran keep doing is just staying on a very general level and making statements that do not relate to specific actions, specific legislation, specific protests, specific anything. And I don't understand let's just take Wolf for an example. Yes, Wolf, more than a half dozen years ago, accepted $15,000 from the Heritage Foundation in order to support a lawsuit that Wolf was bringing. I don't remember the exact lawsuit, but it was a lawsuit we would all support. We all support. Wolf did not change one single thing in their lawsuit to in any way, shape, or form accommodate the Heritage Foundation. All that Wolf did was take $15,000 that the Heritage Foundation might have spent on something that we disapprove of. Okay, it was a one-way transaction that Wolf benefited, and women benefited from Wolf being able to bring the lawsuit, and the Heritage Foundation got nothing from Wolf. Wolf members did appear on a panel at the Heritage Foundation, I guess it was Washington, D.C., with Heritage Foundation members in the audience filling the room. On that panel were 3 out of 4 of the Wolf members were lesbians, and they were pretty obviously lesbians. So what Wolf actually got was from the Heritage Foundation was not just 15,000, but the attention of members of the Heritage Foundation in that room, and who later saw the panel discussion. And it was Wolf members advocating for women's sex-based rights against the incursion of transgender ideology. Okay, where's the downside to that? We got their platform. We got millions of people that follow the Heritage Foundation to listen to lesbian radical feminists. And I will tell you that from work that I have done on the ground, I know for a fact that there are now more conservatives that I have had contact with, which at one point in my advocacy for women against and children against the gender Borg, that we know what it is. We know how important it is. People become more understanding of and accepting of homosexuals if they actually are in contact with us, particularly relationship contact, like working with somebody over time. So I think that we have gained from the very limited association. We haven't supported their agenda. We have brought them to more of our agenda. And a concrete example is that in all the typical right-wing legislation to, having to do with all kinds of transgender stuff, where they say to the court, this violates our religious freedom. It violates the religious freedom of a teacher to have to use pronouns and to bear false witness because the teacher doesn't feel the kid is, the sex that the kid claims. Oh God, sorry, I lose my track. Wait. So this is what Kara Dansky and other attorneys for WDI and the various attorneys for Wolf have done. But in the relationship with the legal wings of the groups that are bringing these lawsuits on behalf of right-wing people, they've said, no. The religion is one argument, but really you should be included. You should expand that. And then there's various other legal things that are more promoting of us, like freedom of speech, freedom from compelled speech. And so in some of the cases, the Republican legislators have added the language we wanted instead of just being the right-wing religious freedom one. So to work with, to file an amicus brief for something that's a lawsuit that's brought by some right-wing organization, when Wolf does that, when WDI does that, that's what, we shouldn't support their lawsuit? Why not? And in many cases, we've made their lawsuit better by giving the court other additional grounds to rule in favor of women and children. Okay,
thank you so much, Holly. And next, Jeannette has asked to speak, so I'm going to hand it over to Jeannette.
Thank you. I guess it's really important for us to actually have different strategies, right? Because then people can make comparisons and they can see which one kind of fits best with the moment that they're in their life. And I say this because I was a I don't need feminism woman until, I don't know, let's say the Michigan Women's Music Festival. Then I was pretty adamant about radical feminism and the separation, the idea of good and bad ideas, and then through the idea of like saying that some people are my enemy. I think the trauma that has happened to be honest, parents and others inside of transgenderism eliminates any idea that there are good and bad and there's such a person as my enemy. I simply don't believe that. Sure, there are some ideas that I'm fully and wholly against, the disembodiment of human beings, certainly. But you know, it's interesting. I run a parent group of now over 3,600 parents who are divergent in their views on just about everything, including gender identity. And I really don't have to moderate that group, oddly, even though we have people who are probably pretty far left, probably pretty far right, and all over the place. And the reason that we don't really have to moderate those discussions is they engage in a way that I think is quite healthy on a singular issue. That's kind of amazing. You know, Holly's in that group and does a fantastic job of kind of what we call building bridges. So we have a rule in that group of no labels. You can't even label yourself as right or left or conservative or liberal. No labels are allowed. And we say labeling someone's viewpoint or actions creates walls instead of builds bridges. And what we're interested in as human beings, at least in the group, is creating connections, because that's how we survive as a species. And that's what we're interested in, is creating connections between people, things that are shared values, things that we can meet on and then move further. I want to say that when we had our first event for Partners for Ethical Care in Austin, Texas, we had contracted with a private entity, kept the location secret, then announced it, and those people canceled their contract, refunded our money, and in about 4 hours, we got another venue for our event. That venue was given to us for free by the Texas Public Policy Foundation. No, I did not have to sleep with Andrew Brown in order to get that venue. They simply gave it to us. They didn't ask for anything, actually. I introduced Andrew, thanked him for allowing us to use that venue. And to be honest, it was fantastic. It was beautiful. They gave us security and all kinds of things. And frankly, I'm not sure who was using who. It's pretty crazy to think that in any way we were being used by the Texas Public Policy Foundation at all. I don't think we gave them a thank you card, and I believe that's all we gave them. But the ways that we collaborate with each other on single policy issues gets us outside of the idea of labels, I think. And that's why I think as Partners for Ethical Care, and me as an individual, and certainly as a parent inside the gender identity debacle that is current in society, means that I don't have the privilege to be able to divide my own work from individuals that I am dismissing, like Holly said, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I simply can't do that. I don't have it. This is an emergency to me. The lives of children and really anybody who claims that there's such a thing as gender identity. This is an emergency, and I'm treating it as such. No one can take away my credibility. And frankly, people can label me however they please. And I honestly don't care. It's something that I guess I simply don't give any credence to. I'm not interested in give any worth to somebody who wishes to label me as anything. I think that's just not something I'm willing to do. It doesn't have any impact on me.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeannette. And thanks to all of the women out there who are viewing this WLRN panel discussion. We have 33 viewers, including members of Wolf, Beth Lowe, and Leah Keith, who is a founding member of Wolf. And we have one of her comments up on the screen now. She's giving kudos to Jeannette. Politics is always about addition and not subtraction, says Leah Keith. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ann Menasche. She is going to respond to some of the comments that
Yes.
have been
Yes,
made.
thank you. Thank you. I wanted to be specific because I have thought this thing through quite a bit. And first of all, I want to say about money. Money is an incredibly corrupting force. Because of money and donations is why the lesbian and gay movement was basically taken over by the trans. Our nonprofit organizations have been completely compromised by the money, the corporate money that flowed through them that pushed this new agenda. So it is extremely harmful, and being independent of people who do not have the best interests of women at heart, and we know their politics as organized groups, not as individuals, taking money from them is not a good idea. I don't care if it's 15,000, 5,000, whatever it is. Taking money from them affects your independence, and that's why they give it to you. Then I think it's really important to maintain feminist messaging. I don't take the position that because a right-wing person writes a bill, I can't support it. Rand Paul has supported cuts to the military budget and against the Patriot Act and things of that nature that I support, and I wouldn't not support it because Rand Paul supports it. I think the question is how we support it and whether we keep our, our, in that case, left-wing messaging, in our case, feminist messaging, making that clear. And that has not always happened with Wolf. Wolf took a stand opposing the Equality Act, but they basically merged the messaging with the right and did not explicitly in that campaign talk about gay rights. And the thing is, the Equality Act includes provisions for lesbian and gay rights. And so even though I understand how harmful it is once you eliminate sex, but still it did that. And so in a campaign to oppose the Equality Act, you needed to specifically do that, but you can't specifically do it with these organized groups that are anti-gay. So that, I think, impacted the messaging. Then I think that there's a very serious disagreement, and I would love to have a specific debate on this and challenge anyone to a debate about the Equal Rights Amendment, because Wolf has taken a position basically against the Equal Rights Amendment, as has WDI-USA. And I think that's a big mistake, and that is definitely a position that the right wing has been pushing for many decades. The Women's Bill of Rights is essentially an anti-ERA bill. It has one good provision, of course, recognizing that sex is real. But the other provision is to codify an intermediate standard of protection for sex discrimination, which is the current status quo and which is not sufficient to protect women. What's interesting is the bipartisan nature of the opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment. Both the Trump administration and the Biden administration have basically failed. And not only, Trump started with instructing the archivists not to publish the ERA, even though it should be in the Constitution right now, and would improve our arguments for abortion rights and a lot of other important issues for women. And then the Biden administration continued the same policy, refused to instruct the archivist to publish it, and actually is arguing in court just like the Trump administration against the ERA. So it's a bipartisan, both corporate patriarchal parties opposing putting sex into the Constitution. So anyway, so that was an important substantive compromise of the principles of feminism that we had fought for many decades. I understand that there's an argument for that. I think it's a faulty one, and challenge anyone to set up a debate. I've already made that challenge. I've been turned down to set up a debate on this issue. But to me, that gets into actual concrete positions that you take, and the right wing working on the right. If you're not aware of if you don't have your eyes open, and I don't think they do, to think that we are influencing the Heritage Foundation to be pro-gay or sympathetic to lesbians is very, very naive. I got to say that. I don't think that accomplished anything. I think it's quite different if you get interviewed on Fox News with millions of viewers, including lots of liberals who watch Fox News. That's really different than going to the Heritage Foundation. There's really no point to that. I don't see what that accomplished except to discredit the feminist, gender critical feminist message. There was there was the position that, or the, I'm sorry, the parent resource guide that was a joint product of Wolf and the Family Policy Alliance and the Heritage Foundation. And again, there was a severe admission in that guide. There was really no analysis of sexism, the role of sexism and transitioning, the pressure to transition children to transition, and male violence. No discussion about homophobia, which underlies so much transition. Can we talk about that in a joint publication with the right or the organized right? Probably not. I don't think so. So we have to maintain our feminist position, our feminist messaging. I don't think it means we can't support a bill or an initiative. There'll be initiatives on the California ballot that if they're clean and don't have no poison pills in them, it's okay to support them. But we do it with our own messaging rather than merging our messaging with the right, who is fundamentally, we have to be aware, fundamentally anti-women's rights, anti-lesbian and gay, and that's not changing as an organized force, even though, of course, individuals is different. So I basically, I mean, so I think if you look specifically at examples, there are a number of them, and there's others as well. Also, the Bostock decision, I think that it was, I think that was also merging the position of the right and feminists, I think, and not having a clear, the amicus being clearly supporting gender nonconformity. I don't think that, what was this, Amy Stevens? Is that what his name was? I don't think he should have been fired. It shouldn't have been allowed in women's restrooms, of course, but I don't think he should have been fired. And I think we have to be really careful what kind of positions we take, because we have to understand that the organized Christian right is anti-gay and wants women in their place and wants, strict, sex roles to be maintained with men over women. And so we have to be really, really careful about that. And so I think there have been problems with the messaging. There have been problems with the orientation. But I want to say one other thing is that the reason why the right gets credit and grows is the default or betrayal of either the left or the people that are seen to be the left. Democrats are not the left, but there's a lot of illusion that they are. So when they betray and don't speak out, then that males the right to grow. So I think it is important that we be outspoken and upfront as radicals, as feminists, as leftists against the abuses of gender identity ideology. We need to be out there, because if we're not, the right is going to get even more credit for saving us.
Okay, thanks, Anne. And it's really wonderful to see all of the comments and to see how much care and interest there is in this topic. This discussion is long overdue. I hope we can bring members of Wolf onto a WLRN panel to specifically have a dialogue and a discussion with women like Anne and Fran. I am going to now bring everybody onto the screen, all four of my guests. I've got Holly Hart, I've got Jeannette Cooper, Anne Menasche, and Fran Luck. And I'm just gonna, and it looks like Fran would like to speak, so go ahead, Fran. Oh, wait, sorry, you were muted. Okay, go ahead, whoops, sorry. Why won't it unmute? Can you help me? Sorry about that. We're having technical difficulties.
She has to unmute herself.
You need to unmute your mic, Fran.
Okay, the different kind of screen. I didn't realize that.
Okay, go ahead, Fran.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay. What does the right gain from these so-called coalitions? In a word, they gain credit for the issue. Anne is right. We have to keep up our feminist messaging if possible. I say we get swallowed in the huge deluge of the right's control of media. Our feminist messaging does not get out, and they get the credit, and we put the work into it. Now, the word enemies, no, individuals, people who watch Fox News, what have you, are not our enemies. But large funded organizations have been working for decades to defund everything that is feminist. They actually really are our enemies. I can't think of a better word. If you're trying to take away the abortion pill, you're our enemy. If you're trying to defund any legislation around violence against women, you are hurting women. So therefore you are the enemy of women as a group, as a sex class. So I don't see there's any way around that. Again, not individuals, Jeannette. Individuals, many good individuals working on all sides. But I want to emphasize stepping way back and really looking at the larger history. It is, I think, extremely naive to think that a large group of intermeshed organizations with an incredible amount of funding is not going to really, write the history. They say, what was that phrase, that if lions don't write the history, human beings do. But what if lions wrote the history? We're not going to write this history. They're going to write this history. They're going to make the comments, and they're going to take credit, and they are doing it. And there was a comment to this effect. They're going to say, see, even the feminists are with us. We really do speak for women. That is what they've been trying to accomplish for eons, to say they speak for women, and they will take us way backward. And one other quick thing, stepping way, way back and looking at larger histories of fundamentalist religious groups working with left groups, and I think this more or less fits into those categories. You look at the history of different kinds of fascism, in which the right stole from the left. They became more powerful, whether it was the Third Reich or Mussolini's Italy. And a really great example is what happened in Iran, when the fundamentalist religious people and the leftists together made a revolution and overthrew the Shah, right? Or US puppet, overthrew the Shah. And then what happened was the fundamentalists, because their beliefs were so inimical, so different, so opposite to the leftists, turned on the leftists, imprisoned them, put them in jail, tortured them, killed them. That might seem far afield, but there are larger histories of what happens when the right and the left attempt coalitions in which the right either is or becomes more powerful. And that is why I think what we do must clearly be radical feminist, and left of center must be labeled as such, and put our own label on it, because that's going to really mess up the right, that all these left groups are coming in and stealing the fire that they think they are stealing from us, which is really our fire.
I think, well, I'm going to let Holly speak, but I think you alluded to earlier, Fran, that the Democrats are starting to loosen up around the gender identity thing, and maybe taking a few steps backwards and thinking, hey, gender identity is not a winning thing for us as Democrats. Weren't you implying that?
I was implying they're getting pressure from all sides, but the pressure I think makes a difference is from within their own ranks and the people they expect to support them. If they start getting pressure from unions, which they have not gotten yet, but from many Democrats who seem like they're going to jump ship if they don't change, I think that will definitely push them, which is why I think it's so important to build a left. That's the only way Democrats have ever changed, actually. That's why we had the civil rights movement and the feminist movement, because there were demonstrations in the street. They were clearly left demonstrations. That puts pressure on Democrats. Working with the right just, I don't know.
But where are the leftists? The leftists are promoting transgender ideology.
Well, that's the myth. Yeah, that does seem to be some of the truth, and it's also not some of the truth. When we were at the Left Forum, which is a huge annual gathering in New York City, used to be in person, of the left, some of us presented a forum there. My show recorded it. And we spoke to many, many people attending the Left Forum. They believed and liked our arguments. They were on the left. And there are now many people on the left who don't know where to go, because if they try to get active, they get tagged with the right, and they don't want to build the right, which they understand that those working with them is doing. Wait, let me just finish this. There are leftists all around who are very, very eager to have an alternative to any group that would work with the right and do it in the name of the left. And we've seen that. I can give you lots of other proof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I hope that progress gets made sooner rather than later, because my
Right.
experience with many leftists is that they are fully bought into transgender ideology and they're not budging. I'm going to hand it over now to Holly. Holly, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, so as usual, I want to bring this down to specifics, because when we go in the big panorama of history and the left and the right and this happened and that happened and oh my God, it could happen again. No, actually, this is what I want to know. Fran, and I guess I don't need to, just tag you on this, but we're clearly, having a big difference here. Fran, in the last legislative session in Oregon, the legislature passed a law that requires Oregon insurance companies, medical insurers, including Medicaid, Oregon Health Plan, to cover any and all gender affirming medical services, okay, and surgeries. And a Republican member of the Oregon House tried to get an amendment to that bill. This is a Republican, which would have extended. He wasn't in favor of requiring medical insurance for gender affirming things, and I don't think we are either. But that was obviously going to pass because the Democrats have the majority throughout Oregon state government right now. Okay. And so he produced, he's trying to make the best of it. And he tries to introduce an amendment to that bill that would have added the requirement that medical insurance in Oregon cover anything needed by detransitioners to ameliorate what's happened to their bodies. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the Democrats wouldn't even hold a hearing on that. Mm-hmm. They just said flat out no. So in the next legislature, this might be hypothetical, but I think it could happen. The same Republican legislator, what if he introduces just a straight up individual singled out issue bill requiring medical insurers to cover service for detransitioners? And we already know that bill is pretty much only going to get Republican support. Okay. And because the Democrats are voting party line, even Democratic representatives that I've spoken to who have great reservations, but no, can't vote with the right, can't vote with the Republicans if you're a Democrat in the Oregon legislature. So I'm asking you, should I support this Republican? Should I use all the ways that I can this bill if it's introduced by this Republican and supported by Republicans? Should I be right? Should I be trying to lobby Democratic?
Thank you for that, Fran. I'm just going to briefly interrupt here and say, Holly, we are going to limit this conversation to just 15 more minutes. Okay. So if the speakers could all prepare, we're going to go around and you're going to say your closing remarks. We packed a lot into a short amount of time. Obviously, there is a huge interest in this discussion, and we plan to have further discussions in the future about this. And thank you so much for tuning in to WLRN. We will take excerpts from this discussion and put them into our monthly podcast coming out on October 5th. As you can see up on the screen, if you'd like to donate to WLRN's grassroots efforts to amplify women's voices from diverse points of view, you can go ahead and donate to us at that URL. But now I'm going to bring everybody back, and we will start with you, Jeannette.
Thistle, since the question was just addressed specifically to me, could I give a brief response?
Okay, give a brief response, Fran, and then
Okay,
Jeannette will
okay.
go to your closing remarks.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Holly. We are in a terrible bind. On the one hand, we build our traditional enemy. On the other hand, we let some terrible legislation get through, which is hurting people. I say the only answer is to come into that as an autonomous women's liberation movement that is clearly identified with the left so that we cannot be swallowed up by the right. And we should definitely have our own take on that. And it should not only involve the transgender issue, because we are so far behind as women in so many areas. So that's what I would like to put my energies into building.
Okay, thank you. And then we're going to go to Jeannette for some closing remarks. Jeannette?
Yeah, I just have, I think, 3. It's been repeated a couple times that we're talking about organizations, not individuals. Organizations are made of individuals. They're made of human beings. They have policy statements, and we can be against a policy. But if we're against an organization, we're fundamentally against people. So I am not willing to be against people, human beings. I can be against a policy and work toward a better policy, write a policy, get my hands inside a policy, remove words such as gender from any legislation if I can so help it, remove language around dress and haircuts and garbage like that shows up in policies and legislation. And if I have my butt in the seat inside that room, then I can remove that. But if I've decided to dismiss an entire party or organization or anything like that, there's no way that that's going to be changed unless I'm willing to do that. And I am. Second of 3 points is I don't really care who gets credit. I just want to get shit done. And every time I open my mouth, I speak as a feminist. To suggest that somebody's putting words in my mouth is simply not true. No one can put their pronouns in my mouth, and certainly no one can remove the radical feminism from my speech. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeannette, for those closing remarks. And now we will go to Anne Menasche for her closing remarks.
Okay. So I want to emphasize that there really is hardly a left in the United States. And that the Democratic Party is confused with the left to our detriment. In fact, the Democratic Party has traditionally been called the graveyard of the left. And that, I think, is what it's been. I think independence for a women's movement means independence from both parties and not expecting either party to save us. And I think that's really, really important. I would support a bill if it's worthy of support based on what's in the bill. I would do it independently as a feminist. I would not be supporting the Republican or the Democrat who is sponsoring it. I would just support the bill. There's been some horrible bills in California, Mr. Weiner being, what a name like that, being the author of a lot of them. Obviously, you have to oppose that. And if you're quiet, it's going to make it worse. It's really important that feminist voices and leftist voices be heard against the horror of a child transition, for example, that absolutely, and that parents having their kids taken from them. And I mean, the horrible bills that this guy has come up with. He's not our friend. He's not pro-women either. So we have anti-women forces in both corporate parties, and that's what they are fundamentally. They're both united against the ERA, and again, challenge that we have a debate on that issue. But I think we have to create an independent women's movement, counting on ourselves, not thinking the Republicans are going to save us or the Democrats are going to save us, but counting on ourselves, developing our own voice that's independent of the patriarchy, essentially. That's what we're seeing as two faces of the enemy. And not being naive about the forces that are involved. We have to have our eyes completely open, and we have to develop our own messaging. And the messaging has to be pro-gay rights, and pro-gender nonconformity. Absolutely has to be that when we're fighting transgenderism.
Okay, thank you so much. And what's striking me is that, there's a lot of stress and tension around this this issue. of feminists, sorry, that was my cat, of feminists working with the right. But in listening to, in each of us having the chance to speak, I'm hearing a lot of overlap. I'm hearing a lot more agreement than I am disagreement. And isn't that funny how when we do allow each other to speak, we can find our points that we have in common. And so I really appreciated that about this discussion today. All of you are fantastic feminists. Thank you for coming on. And now I'm going to hand it over to Holly. And then finally, Fran, to give their closing remarks. Go ahead, Holly.
Nothing that I have said should be construed to mean that I disagree with the idea that we need to continue to build an independent radical feminist movement. I have nothing I've said should be construed to say that. What I have said is, or what I should be understood to be saying, is that, okay, great. We've got this independent radical feminist movement, however small right now. And in order to get shit done, to get legislation passed, to get court decisions that, that stop the mutilation of children, that keep men out of women's sports, that keep men out of women's prisons, in order to actually get something done and make changes and improvements in the life of women and children right now, we can't be waiting for some big movement that we will be able to organize at some mystical time in the future. We have to figure out how we can leverage, such as by voting for bills that Republicans introduce. When I vote for a bill and urge Democrats to vote for a bill that a Republican introduces, I'm not supporting the Republican who introduced it. I'm supporting the bill. And the Republican who introduced it understands that. I mean, I'm thinking of a particular personality that I work with on a continuing basis. And the guy is a conservative, but he's not anti-gay. And you really need to understand that not every Christian conservative is even anti-gay, much less every Republican. They're not. You stop looking at the monolith. That's the boogeyman approach to politics. And what else? My final 10-second roundup. Yeah. So I continue to, like Jeannette. Nothing ever stops me from honestly stating my radical feminist perspective on any issue. And by the way, when I speak in public, I always start out by saying I'm a lesbian. And a lot of times, that audience has a lot of people in it who might otherwise not actually have much contact with lesbians. So I'm sorry, I'm not, that's articulate right now. But so yes, of course we should be continuing to bring more women into an independent radical feminist perspective and activism. But what are we going to do with all these women? It's going to be issue by issue, bill by bill, lawsuit by lawsuit, lobbying by lobbying on particular things. Everything has to come down to specifics. And for me, that's the question. What are you specifically doing, at any given time to protect?
All right. And what are you specifically doing to get concrete, practical results? Thank you so much for your closing remarks, Holly. And now we will turn to Fran for her closing remarks, and then I'll just wrap it up. Go ahead, Fran.
Yes, what we were doing is important, but we also need to learn the lessons of history. History is there for us to learn from because patterns recur over and over and over again. So big picture is important. And yes, little picture is important, but we are in a big bind right now because when we when we sign on to these bills, our messages get swallowed and we build the right. I think we have no choice but to understand historically what the right is and not work with it, because we do build it. It's great that all individuals get to say their piece and all individuals are respected. But when you've got a group, let's take the Independent Women's Forum, that is backed by a huge nest of right-wing money foundations, they are not in a position to, even if they wanted to, which they don't, to abandon their anti-woman policies because they will lose their funding. We have to look at systems, okay? And I have learned this from being involved in a lot of very specific political struggles and looking at history and forming some conclusions. We have to look at how systems operate. And the right wing is a system, and I don't think we can make a dent in it. And that is why I say we have to build what forces we do have on the left, and in terms of what kind of future society we want. If the right gains more strength, they will be stronger in everything they're trying to do, which is no reproductive rights, no anti-violence against women, no equal pay, all the things they consistently work against. We have to understand what they are doing. And yes, in that sense, I do think they are using us. And I think we have no choice at this point but to strike out independently, say we are left as much as we can, build our forces. There are many people out there who will join us.
Okay, thank you so much, women, all of you, for coming on to WLRN's airwaves, for trusting us to give you a platform. I hope you feel that you were able to express yourselves, and also to the viewers that you were able to participate in the comments. And that's it. That's a wrap. Thank you so much. And I hope everybody enjoys their Sunday afternoon. You can always write to WLRN at info@WLRNmedia.com if you have any ideas or suggestions for future shows. We would love to hear from you. And all right, thank you so much to everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Thistle.
Bye.